Hi, it's Randy. You're about to watch part 3 of this episode of Schizophrenia, Three Moms in the Trenches. Mimi and Mindy are traveling this month, but I'm delighted to repost this third part of a panel discussion hosted by the Schizophrenia Society of York University in Canada in collaboration with the Schizophrenia Society of Canada. This is part 3, and the guest is Christopher Grant, an artist known as Zorad Magical on social media with over 1 million followers. And Christopher will share his story of psychosis, and you'll find in my reaction that it kind of made me cry because it's so similar to a conversation I wish I could have with my son, Ben. This is part 3 of Duality of the Reality, Living with Psychosis. Welcome to our podcast, Schizophrenia, Three Moms in the Trenches. From the place where schizophrenia and real life collide. East Coast, West Coast, Middle America. With Miriam Feldman, Mindy Greiling, and Randy Kay. Finally, a place to talk about the truth.
And last but not least, I would like to pass it on to Christopher Grant, our next guest speaker. Just a short little introduction. He is a Mi'kmaq filmmaker from Pabineau First Nation, New Brunswick, and these are, in his words, inspired by the intense absurdity of life and death. Chris animates to express the humor and terror of existence. He has worked with the NFB's Hot House Project, and his work has been exhibited at many galleries, museums, and film festivals throughout the globe. And he's also known for his role on TikTok as Rad Magical. I hope I'm saying that right. He has over 1.5 million followers on TikTok, so definitely check that out. And he creates art and answers questions all relating to his experience with schizophrenia in daily life. So I'll pass the floor on to you, Chris.
There, I just had to unmute. Hi, everybody. My name is Christopher Grant, and I am a artist and creator from Pabineau First Nation in New Brunswick, Canada. So I live in the middle of the woods, basically. I don't really know where to start, honestly. I I have so much to say.
You can start wherever you'd like. It's honestly up to you, how you want to share your story, how
Okay.
you first got into, the artwork that you do, like your diagnosis. It's really up to you.
Okay. So basically, like my journey with schizophrenia started, I would say, when I was like 16 years old. And I remember like it started with, like the first speaker said, like anxiety. Like it's just like, oh, okay, I'm kind of getting a little nervous going out in the world, going to the mall isn't as fun anymore. I feel a little more, within myself, I guess. And then by the time I was around like 17 to 19, I was going to see like therapists and stuff for like manic depressive issues. They kept saying that I had like a like an intense depression, and I had to start taking medication for that. And I think it was citalopram at the time, the medication. Um, so anyway, life goes on. I go to university, and I end up going to the art program. And I had a lot of fun there because I could, do my thing, make art and stuff like that. However, I noticed about little ways in the next year, I started to have these experiences where I would go home into my apartment and I would lay down in my bed, and from the vent, I could hear whispering. And I was like, oh, okay. And the whispering started to say things like come to the local park or whatever in my university town at like 2 in the morning. And I don't know why. I just got up and I went. And I've had many nights since then, from then on, where I would like get up and wander or skateboard, and I didn't really know what I was doing or where I was going. It was almost like you were in control, and then suddenly you feel like puppet strings, and suddenly you're just kind of on autopilot, like enacting like a vibe. It's weird. And so anyway, it got so intense, voices and hallucinations. And at the same time, I picked up smoking cannabis. And what ended up happening is that, well, I really do think that the psychosis inducing effects of cannabis kind of pushed me off the deep end a little bit, because I dropped out of school and I had no desire anymore to do anything. Voices were getting more and more clear, if that makes sense, because it starts with like a or something like that for me, and then it turns into like a full like a gibberish, commonly called glossolalia, or speaking in tongues is what people would refer to it as. And I would hear that all the time everywhere I went. And so from there, a lot of it is a blur, but I was constantly waking up in people's basements. I was high all the time. I drank a lot. I was chaotic. I would do like random things like run in the middle of the woods and like smash a bong and like laugh like a lunatic, honestly, and just like out in the wild, like. And slowly friends were dropping from my life, and I didn't understand why, because in my head it was just like, oh, like, they're jerks. But what was really happening was that my grip on reality is such an interesting word in 2024, but I would say that my grip on tangible 3D space and basic reality momentum that we can all kind of tune in with and balance, I was like way off, if that makes any sense. Um, and so all of my ideas, perceptions, and voices and everything were telling me basically like screw society, screw hierarchies, screw power and control and all these things. And so I basically ran away. And what happened was I went on the road for a good like year, maybe a year and a half or two, where I was basically traveling around my province and other provinces like Nova Scotia to go to like Halifax and stuff. And I would just stay with friends. I would stay with acquaintances. I would stay with like drug dealers. I would stay with anybody that would really keep me. Um, and I learned a lot about people. I learned a lot about vulnerability. I learned a lot about the way people act whenever they're under a lot of stress, how I act under stress, but I digress. Um, Through all of these experiences, though, I collected a lot of trauma, because I went from living in a household that was like make art and play games and let's listen to this and blah, 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 to suddenly I was in a random apartment, and like we have to be like careful and like watch all night because people are going to come in with baseball bats and they might try to hurt us because, and I got used to feeling that fight or flight tension, like, okay, like who's at the door, who's at the window, who's at the, and so a lot of my hallucinations started to become what I would originally I would call it demonic, but now I would say it was just very like absurdly dark. And I never did anything like I never hurt anybody or anything like that, but I was constantly, if it makes sense, like right at the edge of like like that line of intensity. Like I was always like right there. I could see like the intensities and the like bad decisions people make and like the horrible things happening, and I was just like I got to get out of here. um and I remember I isolated myself under a bridge, and I would just spend the day while getting stoned and listening to like Soundgarden and stuff like that. But I also met hallucinations under the bridge that were life changing, in the sense that I would converse with them and they would challenge me. And that's how I took it. It's my personal way of taking it, but it's like this voice would talk to me, and instead of me like I would feel sad and discouraged, but I'm naturally the kind of person that gets really mad if someone's like holding me to the ground. And so even though the voices were being really terrifying and stuff, I was like, okay, hold up, like what's like I need to do something here. And so I remember that I would draw a lot under the bridge, but it wasn't a fun time, because I would wake up at random hours like in ditches covered in spiders, or um just like messed up basically, and just around people that I didn't really trust. And it was not safe. Um, so anyway, what ended up happening was, luckily I met this girl who took me from under the bridge and brought me back home. And that was kind of like a miracle moment in a way, because I would not move. Like, I did not want to leave the bridge. I didn't want to uh work or like get better, or like, because I saw myself as uh like wasted wasted ink. That's my artistic way of saying it, but I saw it the same as like I'm like a permanent marker with no cap on it. It's just, it's slowly drying out and I won't be able to use it again. Like, I felt useless and crazy and no one cared. Um, but that moment of initial love, in that moment, brought me out of it, and I was home suddenly. And then there were conflicts with my mom. I was fighting with people, because when you're schizophrenic, you get irritated very easily when people aren't seeing the same things you are, or hearing what you're hearing, or understanding the implications behind like words that you say or what they think you said, if that makes sense. Like, you can hear your family member be like, "You want French fries?" And you will hear a voice be like, "They think you want French fries because all you eat is potatoes, potatoes, potatoes." And it becomes this weird, like, so if things seem like, if you're talking to a schizophrenic person and they can't keep up a conversation in that focus, that completely makes sense. And it's not something to like, get scared about or panic about. It's just like, how do we find a way to get that person back into a balanced, uh, I guess, articulation, perspective, and uh, well, basically like a good place to live, good people around you, good habits, medication, all that. So um, anyway, after fighting with my mom a lot and my girlfriend at the time, I was put in the psych unit. And I remember it was the time that I got diagnosed with bipolar schizophrenia, which is also known as schizoaffective disorder. Um, but I constantly say that I have schizophrenia, because I think that it's very important that people understand it's an umbrella uh, term. And schizophrenia, much like neurodivergency, is a spectrum of its own. It's not black and white, like like some people don't hear voices, right? And some people don't see things. I've met people who hear and see things, but it doesn't really affect them psychologically. They're just like, "Oh, weird," but they don't take it too deeply, if that makes sense. Anyway, I was in the psych unit, and I finally got kind of like my first doses of medication, and it was an injection of Invega Sustenna. And with Invega Sustenna, I realized that I couldn't feel anything, because it's very hard to talk about, but a lot of antipsychotics kind of inhibit your ability to feel like a person. They can take away your function sexually. They can take away your desire or lust for life. And it's all about how you dose the medication, and you have to find what works for you, which, it's unfortunate, but it is kind of like it's like give and take and push and pull until you get into that comfort of it. And so Invega Sustenna didn't work for me, because it basically gave me restless leg syndrome, and I wouldn't stop. Like, my leg would not stop moving, and it was like tormenting. I couldn't watch a movie. I couldn't listen to music. I couldn't even think. It was just like a month of just pure agony. And I couldn't feel anything either. Like, you would show me something and I would just be like, okay. And I realized, like, maybe it was too much, like the dosage was too much for the time. Anyway, um, I kind of went through like a lot more healing and stuff like that. Went to a college to do animation. And it was there that I got back into the habit of animating things, and I got the proper programs. And I was really happy, because I applied for the National Film Board's Hot House to make a short film. And I decided to make a short film called XO Rad Magical. because I wanted to show an honest interpretation of the almost hypnotic and uncanny existence of day to day for a schizophrenic person. And that film also has like highlights of like there's a scene under the bridge and stuff, and it was almost like an ode to what happened to me. And I wanted other people to know like you're not alone if you've ever felt like you were gripping a bong under a bridge, dirty and crusty with spit around your mouth and an open scab. Like you're not worthless, you know, like it's okay, you're not broken. You know, you there's so many like negative voices like in society and that reinforce within yourself stigma, but you really have to just push through it, and you have to keep telling yourself that you are worth it, and that, you know. But what ended up happening was I moved to Montreal and I worked on my first film, and the only way I can say it is I lost my mind there, because reality shifted very quickly. I went from being in a small town and barely people really even like knowing me and stuff like that, um, to suddenly I was at a like this building and working with this company I respected since I was a kid. And I had like an ego trip, if that makes sense. Like I'm not ashamed to admit it. It happens to all of us, but I had a moment like a couple of months where I was like, yeah, like this is awesome. I'm the guy. And it was the most humbling experience because I fell flat on my face again. like because when I went home, it wasn't exciting. There weren't like, it's not the city, it's quiet again. You have to be with your thoughts and voices. And I remember I would spend a lot of winter nights just, you know, getting high again, and just like drawing faces incessantly. Like I was doing it while I was listening, but like I drew, like I'd be drawing these faces consistently over and over and over again, and it became like a hypnotic obsession. Because I noticed that by drawing faces, looking at them, and kind of like seeing what came out, there was always something subconscious in it that could teach me something about myself that I maybe I didn't want to see. Um, and what I mean by that is like I'd be drawing and not really thinking, and suddenly like the image that comes out is like someone decaying while smoking a cigarette. And then my voices would then, that's like when they come in, it's like, oh, that's our cue. And the voices come in and they're like, you see, you will kill yourself if you keep doing that. And I do have voices that are like that. They come in and they're like, hey, by the way. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. And so yeah, I kind of use it as like a reflection board when I draw or when I like make music or anything, because if you're authentically creating and you're not really thinking about it, it comes out as it has to come out. And it's raw sometimes, but you have to integrate the things that even make you uncomfortable if you want to move forward and grow, especially with schizophrenia, because the biggest issue with schizophrenia is that it shows you visions and gives you, if not hallucinations, it gives you feelings in your body that are alien and very like there's a reason people with schizophrenia commonly feel like they're a creature or an alien or a monster. Uh, the monster thing is probably more from like movies and television and just improper representation. But anyway, so after all that, I went to, uh, I was staying at my mom's house and I was extremely frustrated because it was just me, the voices, a lot of things to express, and no like audience or no, like no one, like I was talking to myself in the yard basically. And I remember I just downloaded TikTok and I just started uploading like my frustrations in a way, and also like what I was seeing, what I was seeing was telling me, how I dealt with what I was seeing. And that was in 2021, I think, in January 2021. And all these years later, I'm very grateful for what my TikTok has become, because I did it also in part because there was no resource that I felt like I could use online. So I had to carve like my own path so that I could survive, if that makes sense. Um, I found that a lot of people were extremely negative about like schizophrenic people and like treating them like they're like hapless or like lost dogs in society. And uh, like I'm not into that. And I think we're at a point in society where we can move past the like the weird shame vibe and try to like figure out what this is more so. Because I think that like another thing that really hurts with schizophrenia is it really hurts the ego and the pride, and a lot of people don't like that. But schizophrenia doesn't care about your name, you know, where you were born, what you believed in before the schism happens. It's just pure information with no boundaries coming at you all at once constantly. And so, of course, you'll have people be like, you know, feel really intense and go, I'm Jesus Christ, because that might be what they associate like that feeling with. Or, you know, like people might think that like radios are tuning into their head and talking to them. How I deal with it, and I feel fortunate for this, is that I'm a Mi'kmaq person, and I grew up in an indigenous culture, and like spirits and ideas of like entities or a disembodied thing that you have to deal with is not foreign at all for our culture, and it's not something that's like implemented with like intense fear. um, it's more like whether you call it energy, a spirit, a voice, a ghost, that's not what matters. What matters is that that thing that you are dealing with, you're able to confront it properly and tell it to leave in your own way. And I don't mean just speaking, I mean like finding habits, medications, way to deal with it, and that's totally up to you. um, so I feel lucky in the sense that like when I was going through the hardest stuff with schizophrenia, and I was like in 2020, still in 2021, I talked to my grandfather before he died, and he said in Mi'kmaq, in our indigenous culture, that there's no word for schizophrenia, but we commonly refer to it as test of the spirits. And I'm not trying to say anything or like push an idea or a belief system on anybody at all. I want to be very clear that I'm language is very fickle, and I'm using what's available to me to describe an almost impossible experience. So thank you for listening and bearing with me in that sense, because I know it's freaky. Um, and I just I'm very grateful for how you know, people are, I guess, sharing things with schizophrenia, because like as far as like 4 years ago, even it was still heavily stigmatized. And it makes me really happy to see like if you go on like TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, anywhere, there is way more content now of different perspectives of schizophrenics or people with schizophrenia, sorry. And it's very cool because my personal experience, I'm okay with my voices and hallucinations. I take risperidone too, just like I think it was Matt. Sorry if I don't remember the name right now, but I take risperidone too at night, just a little pill, and it balances off that kind of spiraling effect, if that makes sense. But I mainly spend my days drawing, animating, writing, playing music, writing music, creating, and trying to maintain my house and studio. And yeah. So I think that it's possible for people to technically recover from schizophrenia, but yeah, it's not something you can cure. And I think the most important thing about it that people need to keep in mind is that whether it's schizophrenia or bipolar or autism or ADHD, everything has fear walls. And sometimes the thing that you don't want to look at is the thing you need to understand before you can grow. And in my case, that was my own mistakes, my darkness. Some call it the shadow. And I know who I am, warts and all. Like, I'm okay with voices, it's fine. Are they distressing sometimes? Of course, I'm not invincible. Um, but honestly, I truly think that like it's not something that needs to be carted around as a death sentence anymore. And I'm not trying to take like I'm not trying to disrespect anybody that has very specific struggles either, because believe me, I've had freakouts and like meltdowns and have been like put in the back of cop cars and stuff. Like it's gotten ugly. Um, but I've never really hurt anybody. Um, you know, I was mostly a danger for myself. And in cases where I was like out of control or off my meds, my voices wanted me to kind of like end myself, but not. It's hard to explain. It's like they want you to end yourself so that you can start anew, blah blah blah. Like that's what you have. That's the intensity you have to deal with schizophrenia. Like I'm just being real. So I really appreciate people like you guys putting on like the like this event and inviting speakers to come and talk about many different perspectives. Because I think it's very important that we have many different avenues for recovery, as well as many different like examples and models for like how to approach that both with schizophrenia and as a loved one or caregiver with a person with schizophrenia. So yeah, all I can say now is I guess I'm just really grateful that we're here in 2024 and we can articulate and be more mature about it, and maybe everybody can grow from it, you know?
Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing your story and for being vulnerable with us. I think it's so great to see how you channel your emotions and like your symptoms into the artwork that you do. Like, if everyone here in the event today has the chance to check out Chris's TikTok, it's really cool stuff. So definitely check that out once you have the time. So thank you so much. I'm sure a lot of us have so much questions for everyone here, all our guest speakers here today who have shared their very inspiring stories and their unique experiences and different perspectives that we're seeing. And it's so important to hear from people like yourselves coming into all these spaces to promote healthy conversations, to, tell people that it's okay to talk about having mental illness and talking about the raw struggles and your coping mechanisms. And it's so important to hear from you guys. So thank you so much. So I'm gonna open the floor to everyone in the chat in the event here today to send your questions in the chat or even unmute yourself to ask questions to our guest speakers. So that you'll have the opportunity to hear from them. And if you want to direct a question specifically, you're more than welcome to do that as well. So feel free to send a question in the chat or even unmute yourself. So we have a question here directed to Matthew in the chat.
I see it. Hi, Matt. I'm curious with your work in underdeveloped countries if you have worked with culturally competent mental health workers and not just bringing Western understanding over to those spaces. So I'm I'm mostly my website Minded is in essence a simple curation site. I don't do the actual mental health care work. What I've done is simply put groups doing the actual work in the field in developing countries. And one of them, well, some of the names are Strong Minds, Basic Needs US, Find Mind. There's others on the site there too. And what they do, they're they want to have things locally led. Um, they're cognizant of the fact that uh, bringing Western people over and telling them what to do. They're uh, I think with this work, with any sort of aid work, they're all there's always a question of, do you help people at home or do you help people far away? I don't think that question will ever be resolved. We live in a free country and people can donate to whoever they want to donate. The groups themselves, the work they do, and also I'm not a charity evaluator. I'm not a charity rating agency or anything. I found these groups and I can't tell them what to do, sort of thing. They do their own work. I just sort of simply push or steer people in their direction. Right now, I don't take any money in donations for them. I steer people to them, to their donation pages to donate directly on their sites. People have done fundraisers for certain ones for some of the nonprofits, but yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I don't want to take time away from other questions too.
So thank you for that. There is another question here from Rebecca, who is a mental health student who just started her internship and will be seeing clients soon. And she's asking, and this is open to all three of you guys, any good advice for how she could best help clients with schizophrenia and psychosis. Chris, I can see you're talking. I think you're unmuted. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. What I would say from my own personal experience is no matter how like disheveled a patient might look, especially like when schizophrenia onsets, it's very chaotic, like it can be very messy. Um, no matter like how disheveled they might look, or how someone might, even sensitive things like smell and stuff like that, you have to look past all of these things and see them as the core like consciousness that is just like vulnerable and pure and needs to grow from the situation, and understand that anybody stuck in that would act or react in a similar way. So
Can I add to that?
yeah.
So, a general skill that's helped me in dealing with people just in general, it's what police officers use. It's called verbal judo. There's a book called Verbal Judo with the subtitle The Gentle Art of Persuasion by George Thompson, Thompson with a P. And it has helped me dramatically in how I deal with people. I've got a short article for a summary of the book if you don't have time to read the whole book. Um, if I mention anything else in these questions, on my website, minday.ca, there's a list there of my best mental health tips. And if I mention something, it's probably on that list. Verbal judo is on that list if you don't have time to write it down. But that's helped me just deal with people in general. And as far as dealing with people with schizophrenia or psychosis, the anosognosia, where people don't think uh, don't have the disease, could be for any disease, could be for other mental illnesses or any physical illness. It's called anosognosia. There's a Dr. Javier, it's like Xavier, but he says Javier Amador. His website's leapinstitute.org. Is it a TED Talk? I think it's a TED Talk he's got. There's a video online. He teaches people how to talk to someone with a mental illness when they don't believe they have a mental illness, how to talk to them in that way to not create conflict. He's a great resource for that. And I just wanted to throw that out there. And empathy too. It's you have to find out, you have to meet people where they are. It's And Chris, I thought you made a great point about if you're, you know, in a horrible state, don't feel you're worthless. We all have to, uh, uh, we just have to have more respect for everybody. We all do. It's We're not so ingrained to that as human beings. I don't think it's something we all have to work on, and that's a great point. I'm so glad you made that, Chris.
It's like, don't take it immediately face value because you might get offended. Take it not personal and you could help the person, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I would add to that too. Thank you guys. Rebecca, from the family point of view, that as a mental health student and eventual provider, don't assume the family is to blame, because by the time you meet the family, they may have been through so much, trying without any support or understanding to help their loved one. By the time you meet the family, they may be hanging by a thread at the end of their rope. So that to, if at all possible, at least get information from the family, being aware that what the information the family will give you may differ from the point of view of the person you're treating. but it's additional information, the observations of the family who has loved this person from the get-go and seen the changes. So funny, Chris, when I was listening to you, I'm like, oh my God, he could be my son. This is like exactly what happened to my son. That must have been what it was like for him. And so when possible, include the family and don't get stuck in the, I don't know what you have in Canada, but in America, a lot of practitioners take HIPAA much inaccurately, very inaccurately, and feel like they can't listen to the family. You can listen to the family. You may not be able, without a release, to share certain information with the family, but you can get information from the family always and give them the respect that they probably, hopefully, deserve.
There's another question here, directed towards Randy. As someone who also cares for a person with schizophrenia, it was great to hear your perspective. Wondering, how do you manage your own stress and mental health while supporting an individual who has schizophrenia within the family?
Thank you. That is why I wrote my second book, Happier Made Simple, because whatever happens in life, whether, and you know, Chris and Matt, you've been through a great deal. I've been through a great deal too. I don't have schizophrenia, but my son's illness, but other things. My husband abandoned the family when the kid, everyone goes through many, many things. And so I feel that we have to get the joy that we can get when we can get it and not expect it 24/7, because no one is happy 24/7. But there are moments of joy. And one of the things I do is just make sure I appreciate it. When my son, regarding my son, when he's having a good day, or he, you know, Matt, I loved how you said that your humor was taken from you for so long. I see, you know, being able to laugh with my son is one of my favorite moments. And it's easy to get stuck in, well, he might not be this good tomorrow. Well, if you're having a good moment with anybody you love, appreciate that good moment. Like they're just like, this was a good day, and take a moment to appreciate it. I also find that with anything in life, I think our brain isn't wired to make us happy. Our brain is wired to keep us alive. So what we need to do is notice what we're telling ourselves about what happens to us, to see if we're not creating an additional layer of trauma by our self messages. So this book is very simply written, because I found a lot of the books on happiness were needlessly complicated, and I actually have a blog post on Substack about how I use these regarding my son, but basically mindfulness, I just tell myself, be here now. I didn't make this up, but there's times when that's the phrase that helps. There's times when, you know what, it is what it is. Instead of poor me, I can't do that. It is what it is, helps me to go, all right, this is the reality. I don't have to like it, but I accept it. What do I do next? Also reaching out to people, remembering that we're all connected, that other people, engaging with other people is one of the big secrets of being happier. Gratitude. Sometimes I just say, I freeze the moment and go, oh, this is good. He laughed at my joke. This is good. I'm currently visiting my son in jail with the phones, just like in the movies, and the glass between us. And when he puts his hand on the glass and I put my hand on his, it's a good moment. And I just remind myself, this is good. I amplify the good moments. When I don't know what's going to happen, I just, let go and let God, you can call it, or I just go, you know what, all will be well. It may not be well the way I want it to be well, but all will be well. Something's happening. I don't pretend to know the plan, but generally things work out on some way. And also huge for me is to keep my sense of humor. Just go, well, that went well, to be able to look at my husband now, and it's not the one that abandoned us, it's the second husband. I did morning radio for a long time. I'm also an improv actor and a storyteller, and I'm taking a comedy class, and we say something is either a good time or a good story. And I'm not saying that trauma is a good story, but elements of it can be given time. So I don't think you can laugh at trauma, but there are certain inconveniences and moments that eventually you can just at least commiserate with someone and go, oh, that was interesting. So isn't that interesting is a phrase that helps me a lot. And then regarding trusting myself, I tell myself, whatever happens, I'll handle it. We'll handle it somehow. And so those are the things. So it's self-talk that helps me, and focusing on the good moments. And, I just appreciate love. I appreciate love. And in the worst days when I feel like my son may not make it, and I had days like that, I comfort myself by knowing I'm doing my best. This is who the universe gave me to take care of. I don't know why. I don't pretend to know why. I probably won't know why until I leave this plane of existence, but this is who the universe gave me to take care of, and I know I'm doing my best. So I find comfort in that, and I do fun things because I have a life outside of my son. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Randy. Yeah, it's so important to practice like things that you're mentioning, practicing gratitude and the sense of community that all three of you have touched upon as well is super, super important. And that's also part of a lot of the work that we do is, gathering people together. And even on your podcast, like you found these two other moms and created this huge community online. Like it's just so incredible to see and have people come together and bond over,
Their books.
unique experiences. Oh yeah, and those are the books.
Yeah. If you're wondering, the podcast, and again, like you guys, we don't make any money, we don't charge any money, we don't have anything like that. We're here as a public service and to help each other. And so it's called Schizophrenia, Three Moms in the Trenches. And I think at some point we're going to ask Chris and Matt to come on as guests if you guys are willing to get an invitation from me. But in the meantime, your stories, I think we're going to be able to repurpose this meeting partly as a podcast episode, but we love to talk to both of you because it's inspiring to us. So yeah, I do take great comfort in advocacy. And, I train people to teach Family to Family, which is a free educational course to help families understand illness. I do public speaking. I like to speak to psychiatrists so they understand the family value. So, helping others really, really helps.
For sure.
Positive.
For
Yeah.
sure, thank you. And like having you come on board and sharing your story from that family perspective is so important because there's a lot of family members who struggle with having individuals who have mental illness within their family. So it's really important the work that you do and being vulnerable with us and talking about the real life experiences. So I'm just going to go through the chat here. We do have a few other questions. We have a question from Lisa Crosby. So she says, my daughter, unmedicated, masks her illness very well, but constantly has voices also. I wonder how she perceives things. Like she knows she needs to mask in public and does, but then at home she often talks to the voices and she does not know that she is ill. How does it feel to be in both of these places? So to mask and to not mask.
I'll just say I never really was like that. I always knew something was wrong and I wanted to get it better. Um, I might let the others answer that if they want to.
Um, I was gonna say that like to this day, I still mask, but I only do it because I understand like I take risperidone now to kind of like balance out the intensities of it. But when I say that I've like lost my mind, I'm really not joking. Like 3 times I have been in states of consciousness where all I see are like Mandelas and then it's just white and then it's just black. And then I had to climb back from that, like from my inner mind. And to this day, no matter how much, like you can give me an antipsychotic that's strong, I still hallucinate. Like it will never completely get rid of it, I think. So I always have to like find ways to almost like integrate it halfway. Like, how can I put that? Um, I still mask for other people so they don't feel uncanny when they talk to me, if that makes sense. Just to keep like a balance. But I only do that because of the current state of like how people stigmatize schizophrenia as well. Um, So I'm always half masking and I'm always half, it's like I'm half here and I'm always half in the other constantly, if that makes sense. So, you know, like even on medication, I'm saying that you have to mask. Yeah.
The masking is a very real experience for a lot of people who have different mental illnesses as well, not just for schizophrenia, like for
Mhm.
autism, ADHD, like many other illnesses. And it's a real experience for the broader neurodivergent community. So, yeah, thank you for answering that. We have one more question here. From Samuel, who said, I was just wondering how schizophrenia can potentially be detected in its early stages and how affordable and accessible healthcare and treatment is.
I am not a clinician. There's so much. I know a lot about schizophrenia, but there's so much I don't know, especially in like the research and treatments and all sorts of things. I have so much to learn in that regard, and I wish I could answer your question. Um, that's all I have to say. Sorry.
Chris is pondering.
Oh,
So
I was just gonna say, well, what I remembered most clearly was that my thoughts started becoming intertwined with symbols, numbers, and what is it called? Like I started noticing patterns that I didn't notice before, and I started calling them divine. Like I would see license plates and they would have like certain patterns, and I'd be like fixated, and shadows would jump a certain way, and then from there it just builds and builds and builds and builds. So yeah.
yeah, I will say that there are things my son won't talk about, possibly because he's afraid it will seem like evidence that he has the illness that he says he doesn't have. Across the hall here is the room he slept in for a while, and it has burn holes in the ceiling, almost like he held matches up to exorcise an evil spirit. I
Mhm.
don't know. He won't tell me. There are bite marks on our windowsill, and he won't tell me. I didn't do that. I didn't do that. So I know there were things going on. And I also remember, I put in the chat that especially with males, the typical pattern of getting schizophrenia is what Chris described and what Ben went through, which is gradual onset that may start with whispering voices and may look like OCD and may look like bipolar, may look like just a bad adolescence, that you think you can fix with therapy. So it's very confusing at the beginning. More often than not, the females are the ones who seem to get it quickly later in life and recover more completely. So you have the Michelle Hammers and people like that. But for most males, it's a gradual onset beginning in mid-teens. And what I would say is what I wish practitioners would have been able to have is a greater education, which you're getting in the early stages of mental illness, so that they might, when I had legal right to help my son, they might have been able to say to me in high school, look, this may or may not be the case, but I would like you to consider the fact that some of these symptoms are similar to what leads to an illness called schizophrenia. Here's a book to read about it. Here are things as a family member to keep your eyes open to. And if you see any of these signs, please let us find help for you. Because I truly believe there is evidence that every psychotic episode damages your brain. And if and I'm not talking managed psychosis like where you are with your medications. Neither of you is going into full psycho. I know Matt is at a real sort of a stable. You're both in a stable stage with the help of treatment. But for my son, he had at least 10 psychotic episodes where he needed to be arrested, not for violence, but for disturbance of the peace. And
Mhm.
each psychotic episode makes it harder to get a full recovery because there is damage. So that the earlier you can catch it, the better.
Mhm.
So that educate yourself as a family member, be as fully aware as you can. And I hope that with the openness of people talking about their symptoms, that somebody 15 or 16 starting to hear voices may not be afraid to say, hey, Chris, this is happening to me too. What should I do? Maybe with people talking about it, that the people who are having the experiences might have the courage to ask for help. But failing that, family members can educate themselves and mental health practitioners can be educated. And though it's never fun to deliver bad news, to be able to say to the family, why don't we learn about this just in case and keep your eyes open? And I think that could help because the earlier it's managed, the better the prognosis.
Mhm.
Thank you. And I see, Kathy, you have your hand up if you wanted to just unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you so much for doing this. My name is Kathy. I live in Thunder Bay, Ontario, and I actually work at an early psychosis clinic as a family worker. And I also had a brother who had the diagnosis of schizophrenia. But my question is, we're actually just starting out another session of family education. And this question really goes out to anyone. What do you think is one of the most important messages that we can kind of contain in this education that we provide?
Uh, I would say no matter what you do and how you deal with people, no matter who they are or what their background is, and it sounds like an attack, but I'm not saying it as an attack, but like we have to keep our egos in check and our hubris. We have to remember that we also deal with hubris. And when you deal with schizophrenia, it very much is like there's no other way to explain it. It feels otherworldly to the person experiencing it. And no matter how much, like neurotypical doesn't want to believe it, you have to respect that that's what's happening in their reality. And so, yeah.
Absolutely. It didn't sound like an attack at all. Absolutely.
Oh, okay. I just
No, I
No.
appreciate it. Thank you.
sometimes I'm like ego checking people are like, but yeah.
It's funny because the communication skills that I've learned as a parent, and in the chat, many have said, how do you convince your son he has schizophrenia? I don't. That's not my job. It can't be my job. And even as a child, I could never tell him what to make for the science fair. I could suggest something and then wait 2 weeks until he thought it was his idea. I mean, his nature is his nature, and he's a stubborn Taurus person. And so that's also who he is. He isn't just someone with schizophrenia. He's
Mhm.
like my stubborn boy who grew up to be a stubborn person. And that's also, so I don't try to convince him or change his mind. And sometimes I will go to an Al-Anon meeting to remind myself to detach from trying to fix his life. I'm a recovering fixaholic. I'm going to make a
Mhm.
solo show with that title. And so I let go sometimes and just I don't try to I try to meet him where he is. And I use these same techniques when I teach corporate communication with a difficult customer or when I'm dealing with a 5-year-old grandson. If he's mad, he's mad. Me saying you shouldn't be mad isn't going to help. If he's mad enough to hit his sister, he was mad. So saying, wow, you're really mad, aren't you, is the thing. And I don't mean mad crazy, I mean angry mad. It's just meet them where they are. If my son is afraid that there's poison in the food, and this is part of the leap process, it's just like, wow, that must be really scary. That must be
Mhm.
really scary because it's real to him. The closest I can understand to what you guys have been through is when I woke up from surgery on morphine and I thought I was making sense and it was real to me, but nobody in the room could understand what I was saying. Like there were things going on in my head that were real at that moment. And I know it's not exactly the same, but it's the way at that moment, it was so much effort to understand the question my husband was asking me because there was so much going on in my head.
Mhm.
And I also think it's that moment just when you're coming out of the nightmare and you're not sure which is real but extended. Does that describe it at all? Yeah.
Mhm.
So Chris is nodding.
Um, Something that like it's hard to tell people sometimes because people feel uncomfortable about it within themselves is that a huge part of my self-acceptance was I really had to sit and like meditate on like, yeah, I am gonna die one day. Like things that are really hard to think about.
Mhm.
They like, believe it or not, it's worth it to sit and feel your feelings and understand why you feel them and your traumas and where they come from. Because then you can bring yourself back down to a base level where you can live more simply. And then you can live based off of that base plate and like make decisions from there.
Yeah,
And
feel the
so,
uncomfortable. Like you said, you got to ride the wave of the bodily sensations that come with bad feelings. And that's why my book is in Happiness Made Simple, because there's days when I have, all right, I'm going to have a pity Randy day. I'm just going to have a
yeah.
pity. I'm just going to feel bad today. I'm just going to feel bad. And it's part of life, the entire range of emotions. I love that you meditate on that until it feels what? Okay? Until it
Well,
feels.
until I accept like things that happen to me and that I can't change certain things, and all I can do is create from here, you
Mm.
know?
If anyone has any other questions, feel free to just raise your hand or send them in the chat. I think there was one other question here from Liba, and this is more of a lighthearted question. She's asking if you could have a billboard with a message about schizophrenia, what would it say and why?
I'll just touch on this point. I don't know if it's would be good marketing on a billboard or not, but a stat that I would love if more people knew is people with schizophrenia are no more prone to violence than the rest of the general population. The BC Schizophrenia Society says that people with untreated schizophrenia can be a bit more violent than the rest of the general population. And I'm trying to figure out what that stat is. I don't know what it is, but depending on how you define violence, it can be difficult to define violence. There's kicking, biting, scratching, psychological violence, bar fights, all sorts of stuff in it. But if depending on how you define it, say if 2% of the population is violent, then 2% of people with treated schizophrenia are violent too. It's just it's it's uh it's not like 100% of us are violent. When you get a number to that, I that might people might make things easier for people to understand. So
I would agree with that as a billboard because that's a very important message. Because when I was diagnosed, I was self stigmatizing and I went, does this mean I'm going to hurt people? Like,
Mhm. I agree, and I also think that the what we've heard from guests on our podcast is that managed schizophrenia is no more violent than anybody else, but untreated schizophrenia can be.
mhm,
Completely unmanaged schizophrenia can lead your voices to tell you any number of things.
mhm,
And so, I would wish from the family point of view that nobody would die with their rights on, that they would treat people in deep trouble with schizophrenia with the same respect they treat someone with Alzheimer's. You would never let someone with Alzheimer's feel free to sleep in a box.
mhm,
Yet somebody with schizophrenia, they go, oh, well, they want to sleep in a box. They have a right not to go to the hospital. I think help needs to be given and attention needs to be paid sooner with the same respect you give people who have Alzheimer's.
mhm.
Everyone has a right to get help, even if they don't think they need it. And I know that's a thin and dangerous line, but more often than not, people are dying from not getting help than from getting help.
I might add to another billboard thing is sort of what I mentioned earlier, and I know Kathy, you were sort of touching on this too, I think, in your question. A big billboard with photos of people with schizophrenia. This is what we look like. Let's make
Yeah.
ourselves loud and proud to the world. Like, look, let's talk about this. Like, put it out in front of people. Um, and like, if anybody here is interested in doing that, I know Voices of Hope in Australia. They're not with schizophrenia; they're in mental health in general. But they've had great success in putting billboards up in places in New Zealand, big, beautiful billboards with about mental illness. And I'm very impressed with their just out of the box thinking. They've met with the royal family. Really, yeah, Voices of Hope in Australia. If anybody wants to put up some billboards in Canada, I don't have much money right now. I'm sort of getting by the seat of my pants, but I've got big ideas, and I'm willing to work on stuff like this. I would love to do something. Reach me. Billboards, let's do it. If anybody wants to, reach out to me.
It's the last illness out of the closet, the last mental illness out of the closet. And that you hear celebrities coming out talking about their bipolar and their depression and their anxiety. But I think there are, well, the problem is people who aren't aware they have it. So I applaud both of you so much for your honesty and your openness and your humor and your advocacy for what you do. We need more like you.
Oh, thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. And same to you, by the way. I just wanted to say that you remind me of my mom a lot, because my mom had a lot of the very same kind of realizations you did about kind of like meeting it where it's at. And my mom has been with me through hell and back, and she's still like, I'll still put a blanket over her, and she'll still buy me food, and we'll still, like, because it's not personal. It's just, it happened, like we have to move through it and grow along with it, So
Thank
I
you.
think what you do is very important and is essential for this. So
Yeah, thanks.
Cry.
It's so nice to meet you two and everyone else here. I would love to hear the stories of everybody on this Zoom call. If you've got schizophrenia or a family member with it, these are the stories we have to tell, because there's so many mental health advocates, but so few schizophrenia advocates. But there's 80 million people worldwide with schizophrenia, and where are their stories? Let's get them told.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to just, we need to have to be on a Zoom talking about schizophrenia with other people with schizophrenia. Wow, I don't get to do that often. I'm 52. I've had it for 30 years, whatever. I haven't had a chance to do this much. So thank you for doing this.
And thank you for putting yourself out there and coming on board to talk about these very real experiences. And we see how important this is, because so many of us people in the chat are responding and sharing their stories and their experiences. So they resonate a lot with the things that you're saying. And it's so important. And conversations like this is what drives destigmatization and awareness about illnesses like this that are more stigmatized versus other mental illnesses. So, thank you so much for that. Like, I truly can't express how grateful I am, and the rest of the SSY team and everyone here. Thank you for joining us today, in coming together to talk about mental illness, talk about schizophrenia, to learn more about schizophrenia from different perspectives. And we've had incredible, like this year we had incredible panelists, and we've had many other panelists in the past. And if you want to learn more about our initiatives and see some clips from panelists who have been on our event in the past, we've had Michelle Hammer, we've had Lauren West, like a great group of individuals who have come on board to share their stories. So if you want to check that out, feel free to go onto our Instagram and our social media. This recording most likely will be posted onto YouTube, and for more updates, you can follow our Instagram. And if you want to connect with these incredible individuals here, you can also reach out to them on their socials as well. They're all linked in our Instagram posts. So thank you guys once again for being here, and thank you to our guest speakers for sharing your stories.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a great evening.
Have a great evening, and thank you for hosting this.
Hey, thanks for joining us for this episode of Schizophrenia, 3 Moms in the Trenches with Randy Kay, Mindy Greiling, and Miriam Feldman. To get in touch with us or to learn more about our books, please visit our websites at miriam-feldman.com, mindygreiling.com, or randykay.com.